Ours was the first bomb in September of 1939, the war with Germany. The following events moved quickly, burying us deeper into an abyss of despair. The Soviet invasion of September 17, our father's arrest, and our imprisonment in slave labor in Soviet Kazakhstan for almost 3 years, all portrayed in my first book, And God Was Our Witness. It was our displacement, our hell, and point of no return. I was born in Poland, in the southeastern part of the country, in a small town called Hodor. I was 16 years old at the time when the unknown to us then, a Holocaust, was taking place in the West, propagated by Nazis, and in the East, unknown, by the bloody ruler of Soviet Russia, Joseph Stalin. The tragedy of this Holocaust went very unnoticed and was conveniently covered up later by the Allies, blinded jointly by the war efforts to defeat Hitler. Sorry. While the gas chambers and other Nazi atrocities came to the surface, being exposed with war's ending, and Nuremberg's trials brought justice to the horrified world, Stalin's notorious crimes remained buried and had been omitted from the pages of history. Today, the memory of 1,700,000 and perhaps more Poles and other Eastern European nations uprooted from their lands, sent to gulags, forced labor and death camps, may be a dim flicker of the ghastly past. Even now, Russia is reluctant to admit the guilt in committing crimes toward the innocent people, even their own citizens whose suffering had equaled others. I am the survivor of that Holocaust, a witness to the injustice inflicted on the innocent people by the hands of the Red regime. I do not have a star of David tattooed on my arm, but in my mind there are deeply etched memories of pain. And, excuse me. I forgot to warn you. I'm sorry. Of those years spent as a slave labor of Soviet Kazakhstan. The evil had triumphed in the East under the hammer and the sickle, and the West under the swastika. The signs of two tyrannical powers being bounded then, known as the golden chains of friendship, implemented by German Minister von Ribbentrop and Soviet Molotov. It was quite an alliance, while the world watched, keeping silent, being aware of the genocide being committed, leaving a dark blemish in the human history. But the past tends to repeat itself. It is doing. Sometimes the memories should not be disturbed, but the conscience will nag to go back and open the wounds at the great price of faith, to expose the wrong and learn the mistakes of the past. One who doesn't respect the past is not worthy of the present and doesn't have a right to the future. I did that. I went back to make others be aware and understand what freedom means, what survival is, how inhumanity to a man can surface at times, at moments, revealing the evil. We had faced it for 3 years. In my first book, I described my recollections, omitting some painful events. Words didn't come too easy. Our ordeals, remembered, still are deeply embedded, keep reminding you how much punishment the body and mind could have taken and survived the agony, yet creating the hardcore, a shield to give you that extra strength to prepare for the unknown future and ordeals. In this hopeless existence in Soviet Kazakhstan, while working in the slave labor, a woman became a pillar of strength to guide young and old through in a struggle for survival. The women protected, fed, and nursed the ill while suffering their own private hell, not knowing the fate of their husbands, sons, fathers, brothers. You climbed onto a plateau of crisis and have learned to accept it as a way of life. You prayed, kept faith, and hoped not to give into a resignation, not to allow it to be a death of your mind. It seemed as the young people grew up suddenly, realizing the spring of innocence was gone, to force the adjustment, to accept the reality or perish. This is good. Typhoid epidemics and hunger made you feel helpless, as our own doctor, clenching her fist, cried, "I cannot help you." Seeing the pain and agony on children's faces who could not understand and cried and wept. And the old ones who did understand and died, like my grandmother, who starved to death. No one was prepared for a death in Soviet Kazakhstan. My grandmother was buried in November during snow blizzard. It was raging. My mother and my 12-year-old brother had to look for pieces of wood stealing during the night, coming back all bloody from dogs attacking them. The vicious bosses. There was no help. It wasn't easy to die in Russia. I was ill at the time. But I will always remember the sound of the nailing the coffin. Few women and young boys had to dig the frozen clay of the steepies deep enough to keep wild animals away. I've got to blow my nose, excuse me. It's just coming. Each time I promise myself I'm going to be cool, composed, and here it goes. I'm sorry. Our slave labor included work around the clock, keeping us alive with so many grams of dark gooey bread to engage in exertion of inhuman strain. You have never thought you could endure it, but you did. You sweated, you cursed, you were stubborn, thinking there was tomorrow. With that hope you lived, you prayed to keep us alive. You winced and swore while walking on the fields of harvested wheat and millet, defeat bleeding from the jagged, sharp cut points, not paying attention to drying blood mixed with dirt. Life went on, and with it came a grim reality of our existence, the very tired flesh and bones, the sweat and itching from the body and head lice, and fleas and other bugs drawing blood from scratching. We used to sit like a pack of monkeys, picking on those critters. There was no soap, no water, giving you tricks, feeling like, women during their monthly periods felt helpless, watching blood streaking down over your legs to your ankles, where male companions tried tactfully to divert their lives, pretending not to notice the embarrassed behavior. As the tempo of labor became intensive, we heard threats to work faster from the crew overseas. One, I remember a dark-faced man from Moldavia, dressed in a black leather jacket, yelling, "Skoro, skoro!" That means faster. At one moment, when then cracking the leather went over the side of my cheek, it stung and burned. The scar lasting for a long time. Today it still burns with the memory. With the onset of a war with Germany in June, our status had changed. We were elevated to being tovarish, a comrade. The men were freed from gulags, lagras, and death camps, and our father comrade. We never thought we could see him again, for we were told at our arrest that he was executed. He was sent to coal mines in Ural Mountains. We didn't quite recognize him at first. The face was gone, teeth missing. Background is being bent, but his eyes were smiling. It was our father. There was an awakening with sounds of freedom in taigas of Siberia and steppes of Kazakhstan. The freed men began to search for their families through the vast land of Soviet Russia. The weak and battered bodies had pulled what was left in their strength, hearing the loud voices of freedom, regained the courage and grit to cross the miles of unknown territory in search for the lost loved ones, hoping for new life, a life of freedom.